Welcome to episode 16 of Ping, a Firewalls.com podcast, a bi-weekly look at cybersecurity, including interviews, news, expert tips, and the latest trends. I'm Kevin Baxter, and I'm joined by my Firewalls.com colleague, Andrew Harmon.
Hello there.
Hey, Andrew. As we tackle a different featured topic each episode. New episodes are out every other Wednesday, so subscribe or follow on your favorite podcasting platform to get the latest first. Ratings and reviews are appreciated, and you can drop us a line anytime at podcast@firewalls.com. As always, thanks for listening, and now it's time for our featured topic for this episode.
As we record this, like many of you, we're venturing into uncharted territory. We'd normally be set up in the Firewalls.com studio talking face-to-face, but we're podcasting from home because we're working from home. So if we seem more cold and distant toward each other on this episode, that's why. We're at the end of our second week of this setup, so we thought it'd be a good time to share some tales from home. So first, let's set the stage. Kevin, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about your setup?
Starting off with the basics. The workspace is a simple desk and a PC. And, you know, at the office, we actually have the standing desk option. I have not, missed that a little bit. Also, the chair that I have is not the most comfortable to spend 8 hours on, and I haven't made any adjustments to that just yet. But
agreed. I might be going out to buy a new chair myself soon. I've got a little wooden kitchen table chair that I'm making use of at a desk that's about half the size of the one I'm used to, and I tend to write a lot of notes and scribble in a lot of notebooks. And when you don't have a lot of space left on your desk, that makes it a little hard. So I've been writing in my lap a lot this last couple weeks.
Using like the palm of your hand here and there too, if you have to.
Right, right against the wall if you must.
So you're set up with a kitchen chair and you have a desk set up as well, right?
A desktop, yep. And I've got my laptop set up here. So at work, my setup would usually be a desktop with dual monitors. So working on one screen has been a nice challenge. We'll circle back around to that, I'm sure. But morning routines generally wake up, go to my set-aside space, close the door, maybe take a dog or two with me, depending on the day, set up some coffee and get to work. Like you said, we did have some notice and a lot of our jobs were able to be done from home. So it was a somewhat easy transition for us, but the longer you do it, the more apparent the negatives appear.
The routine aspect is something we can follow into a little bit more. So kind of get up and head over to the desk. I think that's important to do because, on the off days where I've worked from home in the past, at times, sometimes you can fall into the trap of just bringing your laptop onto your couch or something and having the TV on in the background or something like that. And that can be pretty distracting. So I think you definitely benefit from at least, going to a place and saying, now I'm working and not allowing those extra distractions to come in.
Yeah, I've yet to let myself do any work from the couch so far. So, it's there's the whole work-life balance you have to reach, and it's a bit harder and can get quite blurry when you're at home and work. So,
right, yeah. And I think, having the option to be able to check emails and things on your phone certainly makes it a little blurrier and checking chats and things of that nature. But it's useful to at least be able to prompt you back to the desk if you have to step away for a minute. But I think the big thing is just having some level of structured routine. So I think both of us are, working the same Monday through Friday type hours that we normally worked during the day. So that's a little easier instead of, being more sporadic about it than we are just having that structured, 8-hour work day or whatever.
Yes, and I think another good point here is keeping communication with everybody you work with through instant messenger, email, keep contact. It's very easy to lose that contact when you're working from home. And, you get up and walk around and instead of replying to an email and then 3 hours later you realize you never did. So.
Right. Yeah, it's useful to stay in touch for a number of reasons. One, of course, is for your own sanity. Right. Two is to make sure you're still collaborating with your team because, a lot of work does involve collaboration. And if you do let those emails or messages sit there for a few hours, then it's not a very useful type of collaboration that way.
Right. Have you noticed any positives from remote work for you so far?
Well, the biggest positive is, I guess, avoiding having to commute. My drive to work involves variably some traffic issues here and there. I'm not like 5 minutes away, so sometimes that can be a little bit stressful. So that's the most obvious one. And of course, getting ready for work can involve simply walking down walking over to the desk instead of.
You don't even need to wear pants to your podcast anymore.
I assure you, I am wearing pants, but I wouldn't have to. That's very true. How about you?
I think so. I've found more time to just sit back for a second and take note and make lists of what all is going on. And I know it's been a bit of a clarifying time where you can take a step back. And I mean, if you want to make work from home work, obviously you have to make sure you're organized. And so it's a chance to take a step back and look at what everybody around you is doing and put together calendars and schedules and checklists. And I think that's a little easier when you're home and don't have the pressure of everything going on around you at the office.
On the opposing side of the communication piece is, since you don't have somebody popping in necessarily, you can focus straight through on a project and get back to somebody a few minutes later if you really need to just go like hardcore on setting one particular thing up or writing something.
Right. Then some projects you just got to tune everything out around you, and that's much easier when you control that world at your home. So.
Mm-hmm. So we talked a little bit about positives, and we talked about a couple things we missed. So I concur with you, the dual monitors. Once you use them on a day-to-day basis, and then you don't have that available to you to do basically the same tasks that you've been doing, that's definitely a little bit of a challenge.
And I am not an IT administrator. I've worked for Firewalls.com for years now and talked about the single pane of glass management and the single pane dashboards and how useful they were. And, I didn't actually have to deal with those until I am now at home on a single screen and wishing that I could have my own single pane of glass management for just about everything I do. So, if you're considering those kind of management solutions, I can vouch for them now.
Yeah, and you're missing the double pane of glass of the extra monitor too.
Right. So I guess I need either a second screen or no need for a second screen, either way.
I mentioned the standing desk thing. I think that goes back to kind of your day-to-day routine is you still want to remind yourself to stand up, walk around from time to time, and make sure you get some fresh air if it's nice out and that sort of thing, so that you're still kind of mimicking a day-to-day routine. It's still good to get up and take a little break here and there to get your eyes off the screen for a bit, stretch and all that kind of thing. So I think that's something to continue to keep in mind when you're at home too.
Right. And I haven't had any challenges here as far as, reaching company resources or applications. Hopefully none of our listeners out there are either, but if they are, we've always got great advice for that. So swing by, we'll walk you through it.
Yeah, so that is definitely a challenge that a lot of people may have. You mentioned that we had the chance to have a little bit of notice, and again, a lot of the tasks that we do are fairly straightforward to translate to a remote basis. We use a lot of cloud applications, so there's not too much difficulty with file access or application access for our purposes, but I can certainly imagine for people who maybe a snap decision was made that, okay, now we're working from home.
Could be a bit of a scramble.
I'm sure there's a lot of catching up. And we certainly...
the situation's definitely proving the usefulness of cloud applications. So I think they've earned their place in the world after this.
Very much so, yeah. I think having the ability to use a number of different applications through the cloud and also storing files through cloud applications has really shown how valuable it is in this kind of situation, because you can get up and running pretty quickly, because we know, and we've talked about on previous episodes, that a lot of people, almost everybody, has some cloud application usage through their business. So that at least is something that you can pick up right away. But yeah, I think there are certainly businesses out there who may have had to scramble a little bit to set up some sort of secure access. Not everybody has people who normally work from home, but
Right.
they want to stay productive during this period of time, and they may not be labeled as an essential type business with some of the stay-at-home orders that have been issued out there. So, or just they want to make sure that their workers are not congregating too close together. So
Right.
allowing that work from home opportunity is important, but there's probably a little bit of a scramble for some to make that all happen in a secure fashion that also still gives everybody access.
Right. And IT also has to keep in mind that there are going to be departments where people aren't maybe quite as tech savvy. And you really want a system that's going to simplify that and minimize the user interface as much as possible as far as what your remote workers are going to have to do to get set up at home and, sign in every day. You want to keep that simple.
Yeah, and I think that's certainly been a topic that we have taken a deeper dive into in the past few weeks because of the challenges out there, and we've seen the demand out there for some rather simple solutions, something that people who may not have the bandwidth of a larger organization that's probably already got some easy remote access set up. People are looking for those solutions to offer that secure access. So anything that you've learned a little bit in the past couple of weeks going through and looking at these solutions?
A lot of it's going to be involved in sort of what portal you present to your users when they do get home. There's a lot of great customizable portals out there that just come prepackaged with VPN setup. So, do a little shopping and make sure you're providing a nice experience to the home users.
Yeah, right. And I think most of the network security companies that we work with have some sort of option for you to, set up VPN using an existing firewall setup that you may have. Mm-hmm. There may be an additional appliance that can help you out on that front, or you may be able to do it completely virtually. There are definitely options out there. I think I would encourage people to hop over to our blog and read about some of that stuff. And we've also got tips for people who are working from home and people who want to stand up a stay-at-home workforce. And I think that's something that some organizations are still working on right now to get that fine-tuned.
Right. And, obviously everybody's heard of a VPN probably, but they didn't really have to know the fine details and the scalability questions. They didn't have to know them quite as in and out as they do all of a sudden right now. So like you said, hop over to our blog. We got a lot of info. Encourage everybody to research and make sure that they are safely working from home in addition to just working from home.
We've even done a couple of stories about VPN stuff on Ping here. Right. And, a lot of people may use VPN simply to act as if they're geolocating somewhere else right. with a different IP address, or
be a little more complicated than that.
Yeah, or just for simple security of their own personal devices. This is more complicated, but it's definitely worth, if a business out there does not have that kind of setup, definitely worth exploring because it provides a lot of added security and a better way of accessing remote applications and files and things of that nature.
Right.
Also, since we are a network security podcast, since we've had a little extra time working from home and staying home on the weekends and all of that, any binge recommendations?
Oh boy, so I've been going through the Hulu, quite a clip lately, obviously. I just started with Lego Masters, actually, and it's not too bad. The CGI graphics aspects of it, I didn't expect from the show.
Okay, yeah. I actually just started. I have not finished it as of this recording, but on Netflix, the documentary series Tiger King, I think few people have probably heard of that one. That one just dropped very recently, and it's pretty crazy. I'll just put it that.
Yeah, I'll look into that.
But in general, any other suggestions for passing the time and keeping your sanity while staying at home?
Do some reading, grab a nice book. Now's the time. No more excuses.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely a good time to pick up any books that you may have had sitting around the house that you hadn't gotten to yet. Certainly order them online and certainly read them electronically is probably the easiest way if you want to get a new one without any delay there. But yeah, reading's always a good idea as well. So to kind of wrap up our tales from home, we are certainly going to get into some more issues relating to working from home and also the reason why a lot of people are working from home right now, which is the COVID-19 virus. We have a number of stories related to that coming up in our headline segment, but one last little bit. We've talked about a lot of things that employers should consider. I think something else that we didn't hit as of yet was multi-factor authentication. That's something that we talk about a lot as a security measure that should be in place. And again, if that wasn't something that was stood up right away, you're running into some issues right now with the level of security that you may have.
Right. There's a lot of great multi-factor authentication solutions out there. A lot of companies are now, suddenly working from home and realizing they don't have any authentication set up whatsoever. So this is a very easy way to secure your users who may not be, on the network and quite as visible as you're used to in the IT world. So I definitely look into setting up multi-factor for all users that are connecting through a VPN.
Bouncing off of that as well, you mentioned visibility. Hopefully you have some type of solid endpoint security setup that gives you some visibility into your employees' devices wherever they may be set up. But, there is that added challenge of the places that may have had to switch over to a work from home scenario when maybe they couldn't get back into the office to grab their computer or whatever. So
right.
That certainly is a little bit bigger security risk when somebody maybe
personal devices.
Yeah. So finding some way of getting some added visibility there and having the network admin have some way of monitoring these devices is pretty important. So even trying to get the endpoint onto a personal device, if that's the only solution, still may be a good way of going.
Right. And you never exactly know what a remote worker may be up to. Maybe they are deciding to work that day from McDonald's parking lot on a public Wi-Fi. So, making sure they are signed in securely to your network rather than just any old network is an important thing to keep in mind here.
And as an employee, again, that's important to get that information, how you're working to your employer. If you feel like there's some security issues that you may have because of your setup, then bring that up and make sure that everyone's thinking about security and finding the best solution to secure your access, just as, you want to secure everything of your own and certainly want to make sure that your organization has their data staying secure as well.
And as always, use strong passwords. You do your due diligence, checking emails and URLs that you click on, and make sure we all have a network to get back to when this is over.
Right. And so we wanted to discuss our own experiences and how they may relate to your own experiences. And feel free to reach out to us in any way, whether it be through our email address at podcast@firewalls.com, the comments of this episode, any way that you'd like. Feel free to hit us on social media as well if you have any questions or if you want to share your own tales from home as well. And now it is time for headlines. In our regular segment, we discuss a few top news stories in the network security world and what they may mean to you. Now, time for headline number 1. COVID-19 exposes gaps in cybersecurity safety net as millions work from home. So I guess we can call the headlines segment something like Corona Corner for the time being. There's certainly other news happening every day, but really...
Nobody's talking about that stuff.
Yeah, the virus kind of hangs over all of the news in pretty much every way. Following sports, all the sports news is related to how the virus has affected things. If you look at entertainment news, same deal, because most of that stuff is all pretty much shut down right now. So all we have to talk about is why it's shut down and maybe when things get started again. But No different for the cybersecurity world.
True. The environment has changed quite a bit. IT admins are no longer, sitting in their tower looking out over all the people below them. Within their eye shot, everybody's out into the world and dispersed now.
I would like to see some of the examples of the IT admin towers, though. Those would be pretty cool.
Well, I'll show you ours when we get back to the office.
But yeah, I mean, just as we were talking about before, everyone has scattered for the most part. So this particular article really follows up on the work from home conversation we just had and starts with the idea that applying pressure to any system reveals its weaknesses. And in this case, the system being referred to is a VPN, and the pressure is coming from the virus keeping so many people at home. The article also talks about other issues that have popped up as well, including, as you mentioned, the visibility issues that admins have, the difficulty in, keeping tabs on their endpoints, making sure that everyone has the right updates and all of that. Also, the privileges, the sign-in and admin privileges being doled out to employees to ensure that they can access what they need. If those access control pieces haven't been set up properly, then you might be giving people more access than they should have. All sorts of those things are creating a nice little soup of problems.
Yeah, traditionally speaking, network security infrastructure is built like a nice little enclosed secure bubble where, anything coming in and out of that bubble is stopped and inspected, and then everything within that bubble is monitored and everything's communicating in real time. Now everybody left the bubble and we're building tunnels out to everyone now. So we're putting a lot of strain. Obviously VPNs are meant to be a minor solution, not the main solution. So as you said, they're starting to strain as we're shifting heavily towards the remote secure access.
Yeah, and really a lot of these critiques in this article, again, point to the companies who hadn't previously offered remote work. So there are plenty of companies out there who have had, many remote workers already, and they at least had a head start on this with the structure that they already had in place. Maybe they had to scale up for the current situation, but at least they certainly would have had some policies in place and, the technology in place in general in terms of the infrastructure to handle remote work. Those places have just needed to increase the scale of that offering. But as we mentioned earlier, there are plenty of organizations and companies out there who had not ever offered remote work before. So
getting caught a bit flat-footed here.
Yeah, they're the ones who are struggling with that visibility issue, device monitoring, updates, all those types of things, and, how to allow people into that local network from outside of the local network.
Right. And this article also mentions, speaking of things being put in place in time for all this, as much, hype as there is out there for multi-factor authentication. Everybody tells you, multi-factor authentication is the way of the future. Everybody get it in place. But in practice, not a lot of companies out there are actually using it, it turns out.
Yeah, that's the suggestion in the piece, that maybe they even have the ability to use it. Maybe they have the technology there, but they haven't activated it in the right way or, set it up so that employees know what they need to do. So that's certainly something that you can still deal with on a remote basis. But again, that goes back to how you're communicating to your employees and with their... We can leave that in,
All right, yeah, that's fine. So, Tales from Home.
Yeah. Is that spelled TAILS then?
Right.
Yeah, so I had an unhappy toddler in the background on a call that we did a couple days ago, and we got the dog in the background. So again, we didn't really
webinars worldwide right now are featuring a lot of guest stars. I'm in.
Absolutely. You didn't mention that in our list of differences between working from home and working from the office, but that's certainly a big one as well.
Yeah, you get to introduce your family.
Yeah. Well, maybe not in the best circumstances, but they find their way in.
So another interesting thing that this article brought up that I hadn't considered until now was just how many devices and machines are sitting back at office places around the world untouched and unattended, nobody really paying attention to them.
Right.
That's, like I said, hopefully there's a network to come back to after this is all done, but also concern for physical security even. Mm-hmm. Nobody's at the office really paying attention to what's being plugged into which port, and that can present some challenges and some opportunities.
Yeah, buildings are dealing with having to secure in retrospect, and also employees may have, not everybody shuts down their computer the same way when they leave for the day. So they could be in various stages of sleep or lock or maybe unlocked if somebody doesn't like to take that security step when they leave. There's all sorts of possibilities in terms of the status of those devices that were left in kind of a frozen state at the end of that previous work week.
Right. So, going forward, I'd say, the most important tool you can really add to your box here as far as getting that visibility and control back, even out to your remote workers, is, a strong advanced endpoint protection. So we've written a few articles about endpoint the last couple weeks here, even, and that lets you communicate in real time, even if somebody is not there in the office with you.
Yep. And lastly, in this particular piece, they also talk about some behaviors of individuals. We just talked a little bit about some distractions that can come up when you're working at home. And, this article points out that some of those distractions may lead employees who are working from home to not pay as close attention as they should to our lovely phishing emails that are becoming even more prevalent, really, in the days of Corona. So it's important to remember to pay close attention to all of the emails that you're getting still and the websites that you're going to, attachments that you're opening, all of that as well.
Stay safe, keep your wits about you, and double read everything.
On to headline number 2. The WHO targeted in espionage attempt, COVID-19 cyberattacks spike. So we're continuing our theme. This one specifically is talking about the World Health Organization, also known as the WHO. It's reporting it's seen a spike in cyber attacks, in fact, doubling their normal volume. And they even have a potential culprit identified, the Dark Hotel APT group, which has reportedly attempted to steal WHO information.
Right. It's one thing just to, try to steal money from random companies out there, but attacking the World Health Organization during a pandemic kind of confirms that you may be the bad guys.
Yeah, very much so. And we've already talked about this a bit with the various forms of cyber theft and attack taking place relating to the virus. But this is one that I hadn't really thought about before, but researchers are saying that actually they observed a malicious site being set up that mimicked the WHO's internal email system, which would then obviously be used to steal login information from employees, with the goal of this type of attack not to steal money from the WHO directly, but to gain intelligence from the organization to then sell later on.
Right, and the researchers noticed that these kind of attacks weren't really targeting the normal departments and the normal systems that an attacker would if they were just looking for a quick financial payout. So this is definitely somebody gathering intelligence, potentially on a cure or just on the virus itself. It's believed that Dark Hotel APT was behind the attack, APT standing for Advanced Persistent Threat. So Advanced Persistent Threat groups are organizations that lead attacks on foreign nations, like information assets like national security, economic, big infrastructure pieces. So a few you might be familiar with is the Lazarus Group out of North Korea or Fancy Bear out of Russia.
Yeah, and Dark Hotel has been associated with cyber attacks throughout Asia and the US, including actually attacking North Korea. They've been active since at least 2007 from the documented background that we have, and they became first known for attacks on executives and diplomats who were staying in fancy hotels by attacking them through the Wi-Fi of the hotels. But they've moved on, doing a lot more things like potentially this, and also they deal with a lot of zero-day vulnerabilities as well.
I did notice in this article that the author was pretty hush-hush about the validity of this Dark Hotel claim, though. He said that there's not really any evidence pointing to them. It's just, it's been reported to him as such. So we'll have to wait for further developments to get confirmation.
Right. It's the famous unnamed sources. So that doesn't necessarily tell us whether it's completely true or not, but it's at least speculated that
it's a lead.
Yes, it's a lead.
This is just like several other attacks that are surrounding the coronavirus, whether that not just against the WHO, but against all sorts of people and companies and countries using this virus as sort of a hook for their scams.
Right. The WHO is saying one big issue that they are dealing with is impersonation of their organization. So not just this particular attack, which involved sort of impersonation internally, but they highlight campaigns that are distributing keylogging malware under the guise basically of an alert from WHO's director general. There's also a scam requesting Bitcoin donations to the COVID-19 Solidarity Response Fund, which is an actual fund that the WHO has. This scam is using information taken directly from WHO materials and even spoofed email accounts. So it sounds like this one is a tough one to tell whether it's actually a scam or not. So that one sounds pretty sophisticated.
Yes, and that malware that you spoke of was actually a variant of Hawkeye. And as you said, it's being spammed out to appear as a notice from the WHO Director General, Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus.
Very nice.
I just wanted to
take a crack at that.
Yeah, I studied up before this. So I wanted to find a reason to drop it in there.
Yeah. As you said, outside of WHO targeting, researchers are saying more than 2,000 coronavirus-themed sites have been set up recently, which, of course, is trying to steal information that way, and also the aforementioned email malware that's happening as well.
Right. So everybody just do your due diligence, especially in this time of fear and confusion and panic. And, obviously it's a bit counterintuitive to tell everybody to just, take a deep breath and calm down in a panic. But
right. But you probably shouldn't be getting a bunch of emails about coronavirus stuff unless you specifically have reached out to, groups that should be providing you that information. So if you're getting a bunch of random ones from the WHO or someone else, then that's probably a signal that it's not one that you should be dealing with.
I don't think I'm on the Director General's personal mailing list. So after he hears this episode.
Maybe. Now on to headline number 3. So this one's a little bit more of a good news, bad news story because we'll still talk about why this is happening. But the good news is cybersecurity experts are banding together to fight coronavirus-related hacking. So it's an international group of about 400 cybersecurity experts that has formed to fight a lot of the hacking stuff that we've just been talking about on this episode and we've talked about in the past. It's basically our very own Justice League for cyber threat intelligence.
Yeah, it kind of is. We got the Avengers. The call has finally been put out, and we've got some people coming out and start working back against all the different scams and phishing emails and everything we've mentioned just in this episode and past episodes as well.
Yeah, it's called the COVID-19 CTI League, CTI standing for Cyber Threat Intelligence. And it has members from more than 40 countries with pros from the likes of Microsoft and Amazon, to name just a couple. And right now, their top priority that they've identified is combating hacks against medical facilities and frontline responders, which probably includes the WHO.
Yeah, which is obviously very important to have your healthcare professionals and all of those campuses up and running at full capacity. You can't afford for a random ransomware outbreak to take down 3 hospitals right now. They're a bit busy with other things.
Yeah, and we've talked about in the past how hospitals and medical facilities have been a top ransomware target in recent times anyway. So definitely important to focus on those to try and counteract those attacks. Another major priority is keeping communications networks, cloud services, and more safe and up and running so that people can continue to stay connected for remote work as well. Those are all pretty big deals. If people lost access to the internet, first of all, then nothing else really matters at that point for remote work.
Right, and since you got so many sort of all-stars in the industries here coming together, they're also using their web of contacts, as they call it, to reach out to internet providers and different infrastructure providers to start fighting back against phishing attacks and other financial crimes attached to COVID-19. So, there's definitely somebody out there trying to cut down on these scammers. Hopefully with the right network, they'll be able to do that. Mark Rogers, who organized this group in part, said he has never seen a volume of phishing of this size and literally seeing messages in every language known to man in these emails. So.
Yeah. So I guess that botnet, the Necker's botnet getting shut down did not stop the phishing after all.
Keep trying.
Yeah, it was worth a shot. He indicated they've already stopped one campaign that was spreading malware through a software vulnerability, and they're kind of keeping it on the down low in terms of specifics of what they're catching and what they're seeing because they don't want to show their hand too much to the bad guys.
Right. Yeah. And according to the same Rogers, we've gotten a very good response from law enforcement that are actually cooperating and collaborating with them quite strongly. So that's good news as well.
It's, again, nice to see. It's something that we see a decent amount of people coming together in a crisis situation. So this is a volunteer group of collaborators from, as we said, around the world, and people are responding in whatever way they have to really donate their own expertise to helping in this situation. This is a group that can't do the things that doctors and nurses can do, but they can help the doctors and nurses to do their jobs without having to worry about cybersecurity related barriers stopping them.
Right, and I'm wondering if this turns out to be effective, if we'll see further sort of private citizen supergroups coming together to combat against the world's hackers.
Yeah, Rogers actually mentions in this piece that he's never seen this level of collaboration before, but he's hopeful that the cooperation will continue well into the future.
Everybody works together, we can make a big pushback on this. Maybe take down a second botnet.
Could be. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Ping, a Firewalls.com podcast. Check out the links in the description to get more info about the work from home subjects and the headlines that we discussed. And please do visit our blog as well at firewalls.com/blog. Subscribe or follow now to ensure you get the latest episodes as soon as they're available. And please do rate and review us wherever you listen to the podcast. Visit firewalls.com for all your network security needs and give us a follow on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. For Andrew Harmon, I'm Kevin Baxter. We'll be back soon with another episode. But in the meantime, we remind you to get secure,
Stay secure.
Stay secure.